Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Shelley Tasker Show here. Coming live out of speakfreeradio.com and also streaming out of Rumble, Facebook, and supposedly YouTube. However, it doesn't seem to be working, but no worries there. Today's date is Wednesday, 10th of April, 2024. It's good to have your company, and hi to those who are tuning in later. Another great guest lined up this evening. I've got an amazing lady that made contact with me, and it's funny how the universe works. And we've had a little chat and everything, and we're very connected. And this hour is just going to fly by. But she's very passionate with her husband as well, and they've created what do you call it? My brain's gone. They are the founders. We'll call it. They are the founders of Spectrum Training Coaching. I think I've said Spectrum Training. I think I've said that right. Sorry, I've got a bit of a headache and my brain's a bit everywhere. Anyway, I would like to introduce the wonderful Victoria Embley. Good evening, Victoria.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm not bad, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, it's good, thank you. Spectrum Transition Coaching.
That's what I couldn't read my own writing, and it was on the advert, and I've taken like paracetamol and stuff, and I'm a bit flustered. But anyway, apologies.
That's all right. I'm glad I'm not the only one that can't read my own writing.
I know. I'd quickly scribbled it down, and I'm like, I feel so unprepared. Anyway, I knew it was going to be a good chat because we had a good chat the other night. So yeah, Victoria, tell us a little bit about how you got into this. Tell us your story building up to it.
Okay, my story. So I suppose it takes me back to 2017. And some people might understand this, some people might not. I don't expect them to, because unless they've gone through anything similar, then they couldn't possibly understand. But I went through something, and still do, went through something called a Kundalini spiritual awakening. And it was quite a shocking and trying time, because I'm kind of living my life in this little bubble of my own, and it got completely burst. And a lot of trauma came back to the fore. And I'd written a poem about what had happened in this very short period of time. I'd lived with this voice. Some people might resonate with this. Some people call it the chimp in the mind, and some people's internal dialogue is much more healthy than others. Well, mine wasn't healthy, and it probably wasn't healthy for 90% of my internal chatter, if you like. And during this period of time, this negative voice was physically burned out of my body. I decided to take a break from this constant fidgeting, constant not being able to sit still, constant on the go. And I decided that I wanted to know who I was. I was tired of looking in the mirror and knowing that I had like multiple personalities. And in that, I mean that I never had the confidence just to be me. I was always adapting myself to either fit in or be validated or be the person that I was expected, that I thought someone was expecting me to be. And anyway, I wrote this poem, and then I did this piece on the piano, and I shared it on Facebook. And a lovely lady who my children had gone to some sing and sign classes when they were little, she contacted me, and she very, very kindly put the piano music and my poetry to a video of music, with rain and sounds on it. It was a really touching gesture. And I said thank you to her at the time, but it was about 9 months later that I said to her, Corma, can I take you out for supper? Because you really touched my heart. It was a really kind thing that you did, and I just want to say thank you. And anyway, it was during that lunch that she introduced me to Spectrum. And she said to me, well, you might be interested in this. And she briefly explained it to me. And in my mind, I was kind of dismissing it already and thinking, no, I'm not interested. And she told me about a lady who had trained in it. And but as I said goodbye to her and walked out the door, I thought to myself, don't just dismiss something, explore it, and explore it from an informed place as opposed to a place of ego that just says, I'm not looking into that. So I did go and explore it, and I met the lady, and I was blown away when I eventually decided that I was going to go and experience it. I was completely blown away about the power of it, and how it changes behavior effortlessly, how it changes the internal dialogue, and just allowed me to get back to more happiness on the inside and change that chimp paradigm on the inside and create a happier life really for myself and heal relationships, heal my relationship with my past. And so I trained in it in 2018, and I knew Mick was the creator of Spectrum. Spectrum Transition Coaching is now our business that we've come together with, but he's the creator of it. And so I contacted him because I knew he was trying to get it into the NHS at the time. Clearly, it's never meant to be there because it's not made it. There's too many gatekeepers, despite the fact it's all research based and what have you. And he eventually came to train me in the advanced spectrum in 2019, and I was helping people. And I was in awe, really, of the people that were coming to me and the changes, not just mentally, but physically, the changes that I was witnessing people go through with the little training that I'd had with it. So then I met Mick in 2019, and later that year, things for me fell apart with my marriage. He actually did a session with me and my husband, and I was already, been questioning it for a little while, and it just transpired. We were miles apart from each other, had shared completely different values, and it just all made sense with the way in which Mick dealt with us as a couple. But anyway, Mick and I later transpired that we had a connection, a spiritual connection. I don't mind talking about spirituality. At the end of the day, we all have our belief systems, and when it comes to healing, you have to accept everyone's belief systems, right? Because we have all kinds of culture. People from different cultures come to us. We have atheists come to us. We have people who are Christians come to us. So we have a whole wealth of different cultures who come and visit. And so that's when I met Mick, and then COVID hit in 2020. And kind of everything, then more trauma came to the fore with everything that I was witnessing in 2020. And I guess a lot of people might think it traumatized them, but actually you're only a couple of questions away of realizing that all COVID did for many is bring trauma that they were already holding to the fore. It became a big trigger for people. So yeah, that's how I met him, and now we've come together, created Spectrum Transition Coaching as our sort of baby together. Really developed the website. We didn't do much work on it in the last sort of from 2020 because of COVID, and Mick had created Guardians 300, as you know. He's a military man and been in the military for 30 years, so he recognised the PSYOP. And he worked with some great people because he didn't have the knowledge, but he did have a skill set to roll something out very quickly. So he had a great team of people behind him, giving him the knowledge and supporting him. But he kind of had the methodology, if you like. And so we spent a lot of time in those first few years doing that and resolving our own traumas, really, and then developing Spectrum even further to the point that it is now. And we've been running regular programs now for about 18 months, but it's been there for nearly 20 years, really. But what Mick says is it's probably never been at a point that it is now where it's really ready to go.
Great stuff. Excuse me. So what is this training? What is this coaching? What does it involve?
Okay. Can I give you a bit of history around how it came about? Because I think
I would love that.
It would be really, and it's a really important thing, because when we hear words like coaching, for example, it's very natural to compare and contrast to what we think coaching is. And if we've experienced coaching, we can say, well, coaching hasn't worked for me. This is specifically transition coaching. It's not performance coaching. It's nothing like the ILM, ICF life coaching that people might experience. So Mick was in the Army Physical Training Corps 30 years, and he was responsible for preparing every soldier for mindset and physicality, really, for war, for their job. But what they were recognizing is they were losing quite a number of people who, on the face of it, were physically very, very capable. But when it came to stepping up to the next challenge, for whatever reason, they couldn't step up to the challenge. So this is when Mick became a trainer in performance coaching, the ILM, the ICF type models, and he introduced performance coaching into the army a long time ago. I don't remember the specific year, it matters not. But he was observing how it was helping and how it wasn't helping, and it helped about 60% of the people, but not 40%. So he became very interested in the 40%, and he was very interested in the mind. So he resigned his commission and he spent a lot of his pension on learning different approaches. So he became a master trainer in neurolinguistics programming. He became a master trainer in hypnotherapy. He had his own hypnotherapy school for a while. He became a practitioner of EMDR, TFT, DBT, timeline therapy. I think I mentioned EFT. He also sat with clinical psychologists and psychiatrists to understand how they came to the conclusions of their diagnosis. And he also explored CBT and counselling. And with all of that knowledge and experience, bearing in mind, outside of counselling and CBT, which he didn't train in, but he looked at it, he had applied all of these things with people in complex demographics. It was with complex PTSD, which is what he was working with. So he had applied all of these, and what he recognized was the conclusions he came to was that there were some great cognitive models out there, and there were some models that would start to help with some emotions or specific memories. But he recognized that there was nothing that would comprehensively clear out someone's emotional loading. And some of those, he saw there was a massive dropout rate with counseling, because a lot of people, and by no means do I want to dismiss anything that anyone else does, because anything that helps anybody move forwards is great, right? But then it's about the right key for the right job. But, like I had a friend who had a huge amount of trauma, and she just said, I can't do counseling because it requires me to talk about everything that I've experienced. And when you talk about it, all it does is take you neurologically to the experience and bring those feelings that you hold inside all the time to the fore. So this is where Spectrum really was born from, because he wanted to create something that was an emotional tool that dealt with our feelings and deconstructed areas of our life emotionally. So, being a human being, we talk about, lots of people say, well, it's just life, isn't it? You've got to get on, we have to get on with life. But when you contemplate life and the experiences that human beings go through, they're tough. They're not without stresses. They're not without feelings. It's not without grief. It's not without pain. Anyone that would come to me and said they're not holding any pain on any level, I would challenge to say, well, you're in complete denial. We all hold it. It's just how much of it do we hold, and does it get us to a point where it's debilitating and stop us functioning and create stresses? So Spectrum is really designed as a deconstruction process. So we describe us as layers of an onion. So if I give an example, let's think of someone, maybe their parents had them adopted when they were born. So they never had their true parents. And maybe they then went to school and they experienced some bullying. And maybe they struggled with exams. And maybe they went on and had some relationships that were pretty tough. People just kept ending it and they didn't understand it. All of these experiences start to accumulate negative emotions within our body. And, some people say, well, I'm over it. It happened a long time ago and I'm okay with it now. You're only about 2 questions away of realizing that you're actually not. What's happened is we've just simply adjusted. Our nervous system has adapted to our new level of neurology. And we very, very subtly change as we absorb these layers. So for this person that I described, they might have abandonment issues. They might have separation issues. They might have rejection issues. They might have bullying issues. They may have hated school and exams. So these are like the words that we would work around comprehensively, working with anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, and anxiety, and deconstruct those experiences emotionally. And when you do that and you learn at the unconscious level, what happens automatically is a new set of behaviors come to the fore effortlessly. A new mindset comes to the fore. We generally are much happier and more resilient on the inside. So spectrum is about, yeah, deconstructing it. And we never imagine change. We don't know anybody. I don't know you other than the little bit of conversation we had the other day, but you've had a whole life of experience. We don't have any answers for you. And in healing, well, there's no hierarchy. You know, all we are is a conduit, really, with a process that allows us to take people on a guided tour, really, emotionally, back to the places that have been painful without the need to talk about it, but they can relearn at the unconscious level and resolve it at the unconscious level. And the result of that is they can go back and visit those memories either in their mind and not be triggered, or maybe there's something that they physically can't, they've been physically avoiding because they can't go to a grave or see a person or hear a song. We always test the change and say, well, go listen to the song now. How differently does it feel now? Go and visit that grave. How is it different? Because until you test your change and get that conscious acknowledgement of what's changed at the unconscious level, you won't know that you've changed. Does that make sense?
Definitely, yes. Oh, it's fascinating. And like you say, it is peeling back, like peeling back the layers of an onion. And over the years, I've seen lots of little therapists. Like I've had a lot to do with the spiritualist movement years ago. I used to chair a church and stuff like that. And, you know, got into all sort, like you mentioned, the EFT, the emotional freedom technique,
Yeah.
the tapping. And I couldn't grasp that until I went and a friend did it and she had me tapping and all of a sudden I was crying and it was just like, I don't even know why I'm crying, but I was breaking my heart
Yeah.
and had a good cry for like 10 minutes. And it's like, what is this all about? I mean, there's so much to be said. And then I know I mentioned to you, like my friend who's a past life regression healer, she
Yeah.
always says you've got to do your inner work, Shelley. So, and that's it. We, like you say, we think we're all right, we feel all right, but these little problems, they're coming from somewhere in there that quite often I suppose you can't even remember.
No, and that's the interesting thing. You know, when we work with people, they always say, "Why do I keep going back to a memory at one?" Or "Why do I keep going back to a memory at three?" That they might have they might have a physical memory of, or they just know that they're there, or they have a sense of feeling that they're there. Because the space we get people into, you know, that space when you're just drifting off to go to sleep, and all your mind chatter starts to come in. That's the space that people who end up self-medicating with drugs or alcohol, that's the place they're avoiding. And that's why quite often people will take drugs or alcohol to avoid that space. Well, that's the space where your unconscious speaks to you. And that's the space we get people in when we do the work, because it holds everything. It knows everything you've ever experienced. It knows everything that you need to learn. And quite often, you know, people will talk about their intuition, their sixth sense. We often deny some of these things and we get into our conscious. We quite often talk about the captain of the ship and the crew, and the unconscious is the crew. But this intellectual thing that many of us reside in our heads wants to take control of this ship, but isn't paying attention to the fact that there's not enough fuel on the ship, or we're actually going in the wrong direction, or something's failed somewhere. So, you know, our conscious mind quite often wants to take over. And the purpose of Spectrum really is to bring coherence with our conscious and our unconscious, with our thinking mind and our feeling body. Because quite often people say, I know I'm not alone, but I feel alone. And feelings feel very real, don't they? But
Oh,
all
definitely.
yeah, and they can be very debilitating. But all of those negative feelings can change. Every single one of those feelings can change. That's how we know they're not real, but they feel real, because you can change them with the right tool. And that's what Spectrum does, really. And it was designed for complex PTSD. It was launched at the University of Central Lancashire in 2013, I think. There's a qualitative PhD which was done, where Mick worked with 180 different people from complex. It was around 180 people from different complex needs. So veteran communities, high security prisons, women refuges, and young offenders institutes. And he followed 5 of them for. I don't want to know specifically say the number because I don't know if it's right, but it's roughly 5, 6, or 7, somewhere around there, where he followed them for a number of years post receiving the Spectrum transition coaching. and the stuff was still gone. And so he spent a lot of time and a lot of energy building up that study, getting the research done. And the University of Central Lancashire positioned it as bridging the gap between coaching and therapy, because it gets a therapeutic effect, but you don't need to talk about the content of your experience. And so, can I use COVID as an example?
Absolutely.
Because we've all been through COVID. And we did a workshop down in, I can't remember the town now, but it matters not. We ran a day's workshop just to show people a little bit about, the mind and how it works and triggers and that what we call the map versus the territory. So we talk about the map. This is the person that's in front of me that's really annoying me. This is the dog that's just bitten me, right? Yeah. So we call that the map.
Right.
But you're only a couple of questions away of actually working out, where's that trigger come from? Where's the territory? So spectrum goes back to the root cause. It doesn't just deal with the symptom or the presenting issue. So someone might come and say that there are issues with work, or there's issues with COVID. So when we did this day's session, I showed them how COVID was a trigger. It was a mirror, if you like, for what everyone was holding. And so we went around the room and we asked about 5 different people. So I said, is it okay if we ask, a number of you some questions? And so the ones that volunteered, they participated. And I asked the first lady, so how was COVID a problem for you? And she said, well, it was all the indoctrination that was going on. And I said, okay. So for you, it was indoctrination? And she said, yes. And I said, and what emotion was present? What's the biggest emotion that you felt with indoctrination? And she said, anger. So I said, okay. So do you remember the very first time you felt anger around indoctrination? Where did your mind take you to? And she went, my mother, with the religious stuff that she used to push down our throats when we were little. So for her, it was the most recent neurological reminder of the indoctrination that her mind had told her that her mother was doing against her. So, and of course, a mother's had her own journey, and our minds can often tell us a lot of lies anyway. So then I went to the next person and I said, how was COVID a problem for you? And she said, well, it was all the manipulation. And I said, okay. And what emotion is the biggest emotion that you feel with manipulation? And she said, well, hurt. And I said, when was the first time you felt hurt around manipulation? And then it took her back to the root cause. And then we asked somebody else, and that was connected to loss. And then we asked somebody else, and I can't remember what that was connected to. But can you see that there was one event, but to all of those different people, there was a different territory. It was a different trigger. And the cause of it was something very, very different for each of the people. So what we do is, through our questions, we find out what the root cause is, and then more importantly, take them on a journey to change their emotions. So for that lady who was talking about indoctrination, the words that we would have worked around was indoctrination, religion, and mum, because they're the 3 words that we heard her say. Does that make sense?
Yes.
We don't know anybody. We just listen to them. We listen to their journey, and then we use the skill set that we've got to deconstruct their life emotionally so that they can move forward and create a better future for themselves.
So I know when we were chatting the other night, you were showing me cards that you used, and I apologise for those of you listening on the radio. I don't know if you've got any of those cards on you, Victoria, but could you just explain a little bit how that worked? Because you said that this would work well for a child as well.
Yes, it would. I mean, it was designed. I mean, Mick designed it for an 8-year-old because he said the average reading age in the army was 8 years old. The card system, which I'm kicking myself because I haven't got them here, but
That's okay.
if you give me 2 seconds, I can go and get them, but I'll have to just leave the room.
That's all right.
But I can go and get them.
Yeah, okay.
If you think that was useful, I'll get some. I'm sorry, I should have had.
No, not at all. Not at all. If you want to get them, you can. If you feel that they'll help, or we can just explain what they are.
Yeah, so basically we're just actually updating the cards. So we updated these, we created the card system. This is how Spectrum evolved in 2020, really. We used some of the time to develop a better tool because, previously, before the cards, we would have had to have asked a lot of questions to find what we call the themes. So like mum, dad, rejection, loss, abandoned. And it could take quite a long time to work out the themes for people. And so what the card system did is that because of the number of people that Mick had worked with and what we'd worked with, we worked out a lot of the themes. So the first thing we do is we show them some cards around behavior, emotions. So we have a different card for anger, sadness, fear, guilt, hurt, anxiety. And we ask them, is it fair to say that you've experienced one or all of those emotions in your life? Some people might call it stress. Some people might call it frustration. Some people might call it worry or depression or anxiety. So there's a lot of words, but ultimately we're all emotional. We're emotional beings, energy in motion. And so they'll say yes. And so emotions like anger, fear, and anxiety are what we call stimulant emotions. They're emotions that when we feel those things, we tend to come out and we might shout or get aggressive with other people. We tend to aggress other people. When we feel emotions like guilt, sadness, or hurt, they tend to take us on an inward journey where we start to hurt ourselves. And actually, sadness is the root cause of probably all the suicide attempts. It's sadness that takes somebody there because it becomes a very private and inward journey. And of course, anger and sadness are bedfellows. Some people are attached to more anger, some people are attached to more sadness. And of course, these stimulant emotions, the anger, the fear, and the anxiety, where we come out and we start getting upset and aggressing, which we all do, by the way, those emotions people probably don't accept so much because we are shouting or doing whatever the behavior is. Whereas you see somebody crying or see somebody hurt, people might feel more sympathetic with those ones, but ultimately they're all a place of pain, and the behavior just comes from the emotion. It's the emotion that drives it. So we first of all agree that they feel and connect to those emotions, and then we take them on and we give them the cards that are the themes. These are the words that describe their journey, the words where they hold emotion. So, it might be mum, it might be dad, there might be abandonment, loss, abuse. There's all kinds of words: isolation, intimidation, pressure, expectations. All of these words hold neurology that we store in our mind. And so what we then get to do is we get them to map out their life emotionally. We get them to connect the cards. So who was betrayal connected to? Who was affairs connected to? Who was jealousy connected to? And they get to kind of dissociate. What this does is it dissociates them from the journey, and they get to see their life in a set of cards, if you like. And they begin to get, for some people, it's at a real light bulb moment, and some people come to us and say, I don't know why I'm all over the place, but I am. But then when they see their life mapped out in front of them, they suddenly begin to see everything that they're holding. And, some people come and they've got lower back problems or they've got back problems. And it's not unusual for us to see, well, what emotional load are you holding? What physically are you holding in your body? And it's not unusual that when people let go of these negative feelings, that their back starts to get better because of the mind-body link. So they then map out their life emotionally, and then we're just changing the cards at the moment, actually. So we can then say, what distractions do you have? So do you drink? Do you smoke? Do you work excessively? Do you exercise excessively? Are you on social media excessively? Are you shopping a lot? Do you gamble? Is there porn? So we now see what distractions they've got. And then we look at what are the symptoms, what are the results of our journey, which might be OCD, it might be PTSD, it might be any other mental health diagnosis, depression, it might be insomnia, it might be nightmares, it might be flashbacks. We call all of those a result of. They've occurred because of the result of your journey. Someone might have seizures, they might put barriers up, and then wonder why they're trying to have a relationship, but don't seem to be able to have a relationship, and they keep sabotaging it. Well, if they're running something like rejection, the very fear of getting hurt again can often put a barrier up, and they start self-sabotaging even before they've got in the relationship. Does that make sense? And that's something that we see a lot of. So we say to people, well, imagine trying to have a relationship behind a barrier. how does that work, you know? So we
Yeah.
help people take down those barriers. So they're now getting an understanding. And what's also really important is there's different levels of a transition coach. And so if you're a transition level coach 1, you can't work with anybody that's presenting alcohol, any sort of addiction. You can't work with anybody that's attempted suicide. You can't work with anybody that's got a significant mental health diagnosis. So what it does is it keeps the client safe, and it also, I hate the word client because we're two human beings at the end of the day, but for want of a better word, and it keeps the coach safe as well, because it's an incredible field tool that allows us to assess, you know, as best we can, whether this person's in our remit or not. And then the final cards that we get them to look at is the core beliefs. I'm not wanted, I'm not loved, I'm useless, I'm helpless, I'm weak, I'm a coward, I'm nothing, whatever that they are. And people say, well, you know, so we worked with one young man, and he said to his mother, and well, they're focusing on all the negative stuff, and he didn't want to do it. And I get that, but you have to, you know, if you want to change some of that, you have to face some of that. You know, none of the happy stuff never made anyone ill, does it? So we don't want to focus on the happy things. We want to look at, well, what's brought you to where you are? Let's change it so that there's no need for coping mechanisms anymore. There's no need for these little strategies that keep you safe. There's no need to avoid the alcohol aisle anymore because the trauma that took you to the alcohol aisle is now gone. So that's the way we would do a consultation. And then once we've done that, we work out which ones are the most emotionally loaded, and we then take people on the process of change to deconstruct those emotionally, each of those themes. We also are able to take down any barriers that someone's put up very safely. And if anyone's got any internal conflicts, which will sap your energy very, very quickly, they will drain your energy. These are part-time problems. You know, sometimes I feel this, sometimes I feel that. Part of me wants to stay, part of me wants to leave. Part of me loves my mum, but part of me hates my mum. These are two parts of us that, you know, that are in conflict with one another and stop us from being whole. So there's a whole process of resolving those conflicts so that you can become one, get more clarity, let go of the confusion, and allow you to make a decision from a place of clarity. Because ultimately, you know, why did everybody get sideswiped with COVID? Because when fears or negative emotions come into play, you know, people lose the ability, some people lose the ability to see the bigger picture. They get so focused on the fear, or the fear of, you know, hurting someone or making somebody ill, that they lose sight of, they lose the awareness of the bigger picture, and they lose the capacity to measure from a place of awareness. So I hope I've explained that. I
Yeah,
hope
you
I've
have. You've got me analysing myself. Which I think I'm a big deep thinker anyway, and I notice, like, you know, you've hit alcohol several times, and I no, you may disagree with me. I drink every night, okay? Have done, I don't know for how many years now, okay? And I would like to lose a stone in weight. I would like to exercise. I would like to be motivated, Victoria.
Yeah.
And I get the odd few days when I'm like, woo, I'll start a fitness plan. I do it for 3 days. And then I'm like, stuff this. And then I was talking to my son-in-law this morning, though, and it's you've got to really want to sort something to do it,
Yes.
I think. But I say I love my wine in the evening. It's my little friend. And
There's
I can
nothing
hear you
wrong
now.
with No, I would never judge anyone. I'm not you, you're not me.
No. But you know, I've tried stopping, and that makes you think, well, is there a problem then? If, like, you know, I think in November I stopped drinking for 25 days. And, you know, and I couldn't wait to have another drink. And I was stupid that night. I drank a whole bottle of wine and I was sick. And I was like, you idiot, you know?
But can you hear the goal that you've set yourself, okay? So what you've done is you've set a goal. You want more motivation,
Yes, I
right?
do.
Right? So that's a goal that you've set in your mind. And when you set a goal, your mind is going to say to you, I want you to have that. But by the way, let me show you what's getting in your way. And so people, when they set goals, this is the difference between transition coaching and performance coaching. A performance coach, an ILM type coach, a life coach, for those that are light enough on the inside, if they set goals, they'll work from the now and they'll coach them into achieving those goals. How stressful is it to get the goal? How easy is it for you to get your goal? What's the quality of your self-talk? And of course, if people then so if I was to say to you now and everybody who's listening, okay, I'm going to invite one of you up to come and sing a song at the front of the room. So we're going to imagine now that we're going to invite one of your viewers into the studio to
Right.
sing a song, okay?
Okay.
I don't know how many viewers you've got at the moment.
Well, I know that the dancing Israeli is in the chat room. I don't think he'd want to come and sing a song though.
No, but for those that are listening,
Yeah.
are you going, great, this is going to be my debut? Are you going, absolutely no way on earth am I going to go and sing at the front of the room or sing on here? This is a goal. And of course, I mean, if you want. Hello, Jerry Wise, the dancing Israeli. But the point is, pay attention to your self-talk, because that's the quality of your neurology that you're holding. And of course, different goals will bring up different parts of you. So you've asked for motivation, you've asked to stop drinking. And of course, if you've got trauma that supports that, it's going to make that journey a lot harder. When you let go of the trauma, the alcohol disappears automatically. And of course, there's nothing wrong with having a drink, Shelley. This is what we say to people. There's nothing wrong with it. But if you're in a situation where coping strategies are great, right? I would never deny anybody a coping strategy, because until you find a tool that requires you to not have any coping strategies, they keep you safe. And so if someone has had a problem with alcohol and they've stopped drinking without any assistance, I say, well done, because that takes a lot of effort. That takes a lot of determination if you've done it without any assistance. And quite often, some people that might come to us might say, well, I don't have any drink in my house anymore because that's the way I have to cope with it. I avoid the alcohol aisle when I go to Tesco's, or I don't go to the pubs. So can you hear how the world has got smaller now? Because you have to now avoid things which take energy. You're now saying, I'm not having drink in the house. So you might have a dinner party, but you're like, no, you can't have a drink. So your friends can't now have a drink. And you're avoiding the pubs. Well, what would happen if you could go down the alcohol aisle and you could say, actually, I really fancy a drink tonight. And I'm going to have a glass of wine. I might have 2 glasses of wine, and I'm really going to enjoy that, or my pint of beer. But that's it. It can stop there. I don't need to have any more. And the next time you walk down the alcohol aisle, you go, actually, I don't fancy one today. So we talk about, I'm going to use my hands here, compulsion and revulsion. So someone who struggled with alcohol, I don't like to say an alcoholic because it's a label. They've gone on a journey where they've needed the alcohol to avoid a certain space because of the pain. So they've been compelled to drink. So they've gone in one direction. Then they might have had some experiences, or they might have got to the point, maybe they nearly died with it, that they've decided, actually, I've got to stop this. I can't do this anymore. So now they're repelled by alcohol. So they've got 2 different directions. And they're both pain-driven, both pain-motivated. What we want to do is to bring them to a central point of balance. So you take the pain out of someone's internal compass so that they can go and sit in the pub with friends. They can invite friends round for dinner. They can walk down the alcohol aisle without the need for these coping mechanisms, which take our energy that could be used for something more fulfilling.
Right. I see what you're saying. I totally understand that, but it's a funny old thing because I think what age, look back, did I start drinking in the evenings? Because it was just a thing, kids go to bed, I'll have a glass of wine. That's yeah. And it used to always be 1 glass of wine. And now, unfortunately, a glass most days is a bottle. But I would never look, I'm here backing myself up now, but I'd never look to drink during the day. It's strictly, that's what I do in the evenings. But if I want to lose weight and if I want to be healthier, I know I've got to stop that. But I'm also waiting for sunshine, because I think if we have sunshine, perhaps that will bring the motivation. I'm bringing in all these excuses, and I was just saying to my son-in-law this morning, I like my wine. I don't want to stop it, but I want to lose weight.
Yes.
And it's just one of these things. It niggles me at the back of my brain all
Well,
the
it's
time. I've got
interesting
books
you
on it.
talk. It's
I've read
interesting.
so many books. Yeah. Sorry, carry on.
It's interesting you talk about the weight, Shelley, because the journey that I've been on, and I don't mind admitting, I've been on a tough journey, and by no means is that I've ever had a worse journey than anyone else. We've all been on tough journeys to greater and lesser degrees. There's no one, there's no one that's had a tougher journey, because pain's pain. And it's how, quite often you hear people say, oh God, I wouldn't have want her journey. But then actually, when someone hears their journey, they're like, well, I wouldn't want your journey, because that's also with its challenges, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we've all had these experiences. And I guess mine came up all of my stuff came up in a very consolidated period of time. I can't remember where I was leading with this really. But all mine came up in a consolidated period of time. And of course, if I look back to before I had where all this trauma came to the fore, would I have said I had anything wrong with me? No. Yes, I'd experienced extensive bullying at school. Yes, I'd had some experiences. I'd gone through a very controlling marriage. Would I have had any idea of the neurological legacy that had left me? Not at all. Not at all. And it was only when I started to let go of some of those emotionally and at a level of my belief, could I then look back and say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize the legacy that had left. And quite often we have people come to us and they're like, I thought I'd resolved that, but they'd intellectually resolved it. People who say they're positive thinkers, I was a positive thinker. I was like, well, I can't do anything about it. It's done. I've just got to get on, right? But you're still accumulating. You're still accumulating. We're accumulating all the time with all of the experiences that we have. And it just depends on, how much neurology somebody can hold. And so when some people reach a point of breakdown, which is what I did, if you think about like my cup here, and you think we're born and we start collecting these, when a child starts screaming because they've dropped their ice cream on the floor and they're angry and they're upset, they're installing emotions into their physical being. They're going in. And they're going in all the way through life. And it gets to a point where your vessel can't hold it anymore. And so this is why people, like I was back in 2017, just kept crying. I was just full of so much fear, so much anxiety, so much low self-esteem. I just couldn't contain it anymore. My body was telling me it needs to come out. And of course, our mind speaks to us through two mechanisms, through emotion and through pain. And if somebody's in total denial of their journey, they might start getting ill. The body starts talking to them, like a friend of mine did in 2020 when she ended up having a brainstem bleed. She'd been through a lot of trauma and she ended up, she very nearly died, just, in the middle of COVID. And she had to relearn to walk. And I said to her, you need to come on one of our programs. I said, you need to face this stuff. I said, you lost your mum. I said, do you want your children to lose their mum because of your trauma? And she said, no, it's time for me to face it. And she came on a program. It was in the middle of 2020. We met a lovely couple during that time. And we ran the whole program for nothing. Had a lot of veterans come on the program. And Dolores Cahill actually came as well and met some of the people. Wonderful lady. And my friend came on the program. She couldn't walk 30 yards without her stick. She couldn't walk beyond that. And this might sound pretty miraculous, but it was also very beautiful. Day 2, she walked 1.5 miles across a frozen field, completely unaided.
Wow. And I
that
don't doubt that. Yeah, yeah.
And that was the power of her. And then, of course, the veterans, bless them, they had a stick because she couldn't walk back. So they made a little, they held this stick, two guys either side, and she sat on the stick. This wasn't a stick, it was a branch. And they carried her 1.5 miles home. I've got the photographs of it. But she came with that walking stick and she went without it. She forgot it and she left it there. So, and Mick, when he was first doing this, he had a place in France and he ran a lot of programs for veterans. And they came with walking sticks. And he says, I've got about 30 walking sticks hanging up in my place in France, where they came with a walking stick and then they left without it.
And I should imagine the veterans, I mean, that psychologically, the stuff that they've seen, we've just been talking about it this evening, actually, because we've got a man in our town, and without sounding cruel, he's a Fruit Loop. Bless him. And he's homeless. He's been so let down, but this man's been out fighting for our country, and the effects of that. But there's just no help, Victoria.
No, there isn't, Shelley.
It's so upsetting. And another young man, I know he'd been to Afghanistan as well, and he's had meltdowns in the street and stuff. And I mean, but the other person, I mean, most people in my town would know who you're talking about. I mean, my other half said he popped into Tesco's this morning and he said he was playing hide and seek by himself in the foyer and stuff, and I'll say all right to him all the time and, buy him a coffee every now and then, and lots of people look after him that way. But this man that went to fight for our country,
I know,
and he's living like that, no help.
I know, and I think there's a good percentage of those in prison that are veterans as well. And what's really shocking is these global charities that we have that are for veterans, that a lot of people support. The veterans, if you talk to the veterans, it doesn't get anywhere near them. It does nothing at the level of... So we worked with an Irish guard, a wonderful man. He's in his 70s. And he's not a well man himself. And he's devoted his life to helping these veterans. And, our programs, I wish we could offer our programs for nothing. I really do. My passion is people. I know what it's like to be in emotional pain. I know what it's like to diminish yourself to the point that you have no self-confidence. That's a horrible place to be. I haven't had the journey of the veteran, but I know what it's like to feel pain. And to be able to... I'm going to get tearful now. To be able to watch the people that comes on our program and watch their journey. We take on the most complex of cases. When we ran that program with my friend went on, there was a veteran. He's actually been walking the country for 2 years, cycling the country for 2 years. There's another veteran that's just been on the BBC. And I said to him, it's amazing what you're doing. But when they told you about, how did you get help? I said, I'm a little bit disappointed that you didn't mention, because it's such a powerful tool that needs to be known about. And there's another veteran that we helped. I think he's going on GB News. I've just seen he's got a PTSD camp in Bath. And I'm going to message him and say, please, can you mention? Because this is such powerful stuff and people don't realize that there's help out there. But going back to this veteran that was getting funding for people to come on our programs. And we've run programs for people that have got nothing as well. We've done our fair share of that. But he was talking to generals that were sitting on £1.5 million worth of money and were quibbling about £700 to bring somebody on a program. And they're sitting on this money. And another veteran came on our program. A couple of them are now setting up their own charity. And he said, I don't know if it was to his father or I don't know, it doesn't matter, but he was telling him about this charity. So whoever it was went and looked into the charity, and he noticed that they hadn't submitted their accounts for 3 months and they hadn't spent any money for a year. And so, because even though Ray was asking for money, the money never came from them. In the end, it came from SAFA, another funding organisation. And anyway, he had an email exchange and they explained why they hadn't submitted their accounts. They didn't explain why they hadn't spent any of the money that they'd raised from people who was giving it with a good heart. And at the bottom of the email says, but if you'd like to donate to our charity, please donate here. And so I get, one of those veterans, the one that's been on the BBC recently, and he won't mind me sharing because we've got permission to. He'd attempted suicide 9 times, you know, and there was no help for them. So they take these veterans on these journeys of war that, is all created by lies. They use and abuse them, and then they pop them out the other end and do nothing at the level of decommissioning. Now, I get it. Until Spectrum came along, I'm not sure what would deal with complex PTSD. I'm not sure, how they would actually resolve that. But to
They'd
be
be on a
able to,
waiting list for Outlook and they'd never get seen.
they'd never get seen.
Probably.
And
Yeah.
no, and to take someone on that journey where they come in and they're like this, and for them to leave 3 days later, 3.5 days later, this particular gentleman, Ray was coming to collect and he wasn't able to because he wasn't very well. So he had to take the bus into London and then to where he was going on the home. And he said, Vicky, he said, I'm really nervous. He said, because I've not been on a bus on my own for such a long time, and this, that, and the other. And I said, right, you're going to go, because what you're going to find out is you're going to meet a new version of you. At the moment, you're imagining an old you because you haven't done this since you've done the change work. And he'd had a problem with the police because of what was going on in his life at the time. And he didn't like to talk to strangers. These are some of the things that he shared with us, right? He then started sending us photographs of Buckingham Palace where he served as a guardsman.
Wow.
And I said to him, who took the photograph? He went, oh, a tourist. And I went, would you have asked the tourist to take the photograph? He went, oh my goodness, no, I wouldn't. He said, oh, then I was talking to a policeman about whether old Charlie boy was in the palace or not. And he told me he wasn't. And I said, and would you have spoken to the policeman before? And he went, no, I wouldn't. He spent the whole evening in London reminiscing. And he was separated from his 2 boys at the time, going through a very toxic time. 3 days later, he met with his 2 boys and he met with his partner and they got back together. And this whole toxic thing that was going off was healed because he, the journey was difficult because she was holding her stuff, he was holding his stuff. And when 2 people have an argument, it's never about what they're arguing about. It never is. And, have you ever had an argument where you suddenly think, well, what am I even arguing about? I don't even understand why I'm arguing. But all that's happening is you become the mirrors, the neurological trigger for something else that you're holding, and it becomes quite complex to understand. So you can never get out of your own frame. So for you, Shelley, you're trying to work out where it comes from. You're never going to be able to do that on your own. You might have some idea, but you need someone else to ask the questions, to actually do the semantic questioning, to take you back to the grassroots so that it can be resolved at the grassroots. You can't do that on your own. People can do it intellectually, like when I went to counselling around the bullying, I had a real light bulb moment in the counselling, and it really helped me get an understanding of what had happened, because I felt I never had any friends at school. But I was extensively bullied from 6 years old. But I couldn't understand why I didn't have any friends. And it was a very simple thing that the counsellor said to me. She said, imagine that you're here and you're being bullied. She said, what sort of person's going to come and join you? And I was like, oh my goodness. I never thought of it like that, because if I'm being bullied, the chances are if someone comes and joins me, they're going to be a target as well. And of course, afterwards, your mind tells you all these lies about the reason why it is. And then you leave school and then you meet people and you realize there were people that enjoyed your company, but your mind tells you these lies, so it was a real understanding. And then, of course, when I came across Spectrum, the lady said to me, I said, well, I've resolved all my stuff around bullying. And she said, okay, show me, prove it to me. She said, get a memory. I want you to sit in the memory and I want you to welcome it in. And I started crying. And I said, I don't understand. I said, I thought I'd resolved this. And she said, you've got a cognitive understanding of it. You haven't resolved the feelings.
Amazing. Fascinating stuff. Well, we are going to round up, Victoria, because the music is going to come in any minute.
Oh, okay.
What's your website, my lovely?
It's www. Shall I put it in the chat?
Yes, do so. It's been awesome talking to you, and I hope that, well, I'm sure you will help lots of people.
Yes,
And
thank you for having me.
no, you're very welcome. And yeah, www.spectrum.co.uk, and I'll put the link in the Facebook page.
Yeah,
Have a wonderful.
spectrumtc.co.uk.
We'll have you back and we'll chat further again. Lots to talk about.
Yeah,
I want to
thank
talk about
you,
your
Shelley.
Kundalini experience and stuff.
Bless your heart.
Thank you. Thank you for being a guest.
Thank
And
you
I
for
will
inviting
be
me.
up in 2 minutes, everyone, with Malefica Scott for the Kerno Connection. Don't go away. Take care,
Bye-bye,
listeners.
Jerry.
Yes. Sorry, Jerry. Speak to you in a little bit, maybe.